Howdy, my name is John Wesley Hammond. I'm in your English 231 class. So, going over chapter 2, what most of this text is, or what it involves really, is over the overall history of the smartphone. You go into pretty, pretty, ex pretty specific detail about how the telephone was invented by Alexander Graham Bell. And we go up to about 2007, 2008, in the current timeline of Apple and Steve Jobs unveiling the iPhone. And you go into kind of detail about really the true, what most people call the technical smartphone was the Apple iPhone, although there were quite a few others, such as the BlackBerry that you mentioned, and there was another one, I believe, that was actually dubbed the iPhone, and that one, I believe, was kind of the first one that kind of had kind of like a stylus to it. Um, but you went over detail about how iPhones are really, concepted and created, and how kind of Steve Jobs was more of a tweaker than like the actual inventor, the true inventor of this iPhone. He was just kind of the one that would tweak it to the point in which it was perfection, or what most of the people that were looking for technology wanted. Uh, then after that, you kind of went into a little bit more detail about, excuse me, you went into a little bit more detail about the ubiquity of the smartphone and how kind of right around 2013, 2014, more and more people began adopting the smartphone. This began uh, going from just the middle class to upper class, to now lower middle and lower income, as well as older people, such as my grandparents, for instance. I believe my granddad is 93 at the time of this video, and I believe he has a touchscreen Android that I know of. And now you went over kind of how Walmart and kind of all these other places are starting to really target the lower income of the smartphone segment, and how fast that is actually rapidly growing. In which pay like their payment plans, like pay as you go or pay for a certain amount of preloaded minutes. Uh, Most of the phones, any kind of phone plan you can find now, will involve a smartphone. My grandparents, that was actually one of the reasons they had to get a smartphone, is because they couldn't get a flip phone anymore. And so, even though they do have a smartphone, it is probably one of the lower ends of the smartphone sector, I guess, comparatively to iPhone. This one's like super low tech, but they're still able to take photos, text, talk, access the internet. I'm sure they could probably get Facebook or Twitter on there, but they're also 90 plus years old, so I don't believe they're going to be on the social media as much. You also, towards the end, you kind of summarize the hysteria of this ongoing debate with smartphones, and how you're at the time of the writing you're 35, so I believe now you may be 38. Hopefully that's a good guess. And you're debating whether or not to kind of relish it and enjoy this whole new craze, or to kind of start bashing it a little bit more, and to criticize it and believe it's more of a harmful tool instead of something that could be very beneficial to I guess mankind and to newer generations of people. And I believe that was kind of primarily most of the story on that, and it was just kind of like an ongoing debate towards the end of the text, in which you were kind of just debating whether or not to fully agree with it and welcome this new technology as it continues to progress, or to go against it. You also went into detail about Moore's law. I did take a management informational systems. I'm a business major, and so I took that last spring, and I do know, going into extensive detail about Moore's law. And I remember our professor was also saying that the whole, I believe it was like transistors, can only exponentially climb so far until it can't go any further. It's almost impossible, and that's actually kind of what we're running into. It's based on like the silicon, this little silicon transistor squares it's not that the technical space in which the machining can create more transistors. It's the actual silicon, the material itself, in which with so many more transistors and so much more electricity flowing through these little silicon chips that it's only, I guess you can only make transistor wires so close to each other until the silicon itself melts. And so that's kind of the issue we're kind of starting to see, and run to the issue with Moore's law, as he's accurate with that prediction. My personal my personal reflection, I do remember kind of receiving my first kind of technical smartphone, in which I could talk and text, access a little bit of the internet, and I believe that was in 2011, give or take. I had my first iPhone, which was the iPhone 3GS, I believe in 2013 or 2014. I had that for multiple years, and as you also said, with iPhone, just kind of after a while, it became pretty much phased out. It wasn't really too useful anymore. The phone itself began like after multiple updates, I couldn't be able to update to a certain extent. Later on, that they put out operating systems in which my phone was not compatible anymore to upgrade or to update the software. And so I thought, it really took that as a visible sign that, Apple's kind of forcing me to be in need of having to upgrade again, to re-upgrade again and start all over. Um, and to reflect on other writings, uh, same kind of thing with the phone, the iPhone becoming more and more ubiquitous. Pretty much everyone having a smartphone or an iPhone of some sort. It just kind of reflecting on your chapter one, in which we are just heavily reliant on these smartphones. It's getting to the point now in which I believe you also said something about the something with death, in which if you're not checking your phone or your phone number, you're practically dead. It's same, I guess you can say it now with like jobs and kind of urgent email responses that are needed. Same type of thing. You could possibly lose your job if you don't answer an email in a reasonable amount of time. Uh, Trying to think. There's also, the constant need of having to check notifications from your chapter one. You said this in chapter two, in which kind of the BlackBerry was the first one to revolutionize that with the push notifications. So I thought that was, pretty prevalent in your chapter two writing comparatively to that. And I believe that's it. Anyways, thank you so much.